Dr. Bray has been the medical director of the environmental health clinic at Women's College Hospital and also an associate professor in the Department of Family and Community Medicine at U of T for a period of 10 years. She was chair of the Environmental Health Committee of the Ontario College of Family Practice, and she has taught university courses, lots of them, and won awards for many things in the area of environmental health. She has spearheaded grants funding. She has mentored, she has taught hundreds of medical students and peers. So Dr. Bray has really made a big contribution, especially to environmental health. And she comes through first having achieved a degree in chemical engineering, and then a master's of science in pharmacology and biomedical engineering, then medicine at U of T, then family practice at UBC, and also she's got a master's of health science, public health in family and community medicine. So this is a person with lots of experience and a lot of education. So we're very pleased to welcome Dr. Riina Bray to talk to us at this environmental health symposium.
My talk today is about environmental health in our community. And as Joss has said, I've been doing environmental health or environmental medicine both for over 25 years now. And I think that the most important thing to remember about all this is that we're always learning and we're always trying to do detective work in our surroundings to figure out how we can improve our health and why is it that people are not feeling well, and you know, how do we proceed. So I'm just going to get my watch so I can keep track of the time. There we go. There we go. Okay. Let's see. I can move this slideshow. Oh, here we go. So environmental health is the study of effects upon human beings from the environment, obviously, but it looks at the physical aspects of the environment, the chemical, biological factors, and that, even though it sounds very simplistic, is incredibly complicated. You just basically have to think of everything around you on many, many levels, microscopically and macroscopically. It's a public health-based discipline, and it is a determinant of health. When we talk about environmental health and its impact on our well-being, on the biopsychosocial, even spiritual model of health, we look at it when it comes to sort of the medical model, so to speak. We look at it as a concept of total load, and that even preconceptually, before the zygote is formed, there have been exposures to that person. And so those exposures just continue on until the present moment. And you could look at it as if we're barrels, and we just keep on accumulating stuff over time. So basically what we eat, drink, breathe, touch, and can't eliminate end up becoming what is called the total load. And the total toxic burden, or this total load, is the total toxic exposure minus the ability to detoxify and excrete. And you kind of scratch your head and you wonder, well, what on earth could that be? Can I figure out what it is? Is it possible for me to dig deep and eliminate those things that might be impacting on my health. Well, the truth of the matter is that we're still, and will probably always be, extremely ignorant about what truly is impacting on us. There's a lot that we see, but really, truthfully, there's a lot that isn't well delineated. We don't even know if a substance has the impacts that we thought it had. So there's only a little bit of proven harm in the literature for certain substances or physical agents or biological agents. And then there's this partially proven, not yet recognized, and forever unrecognized areas that will always remain a mystery. And I think we have to humble ourselves to that, understanding that, we can only do what we can do and not try to play with fire, not try to play God, not try to play anything, and just try to keep things very simple, very pure, and avoid getting into a lot of trouble. And unfortunately, we've got our planet and ourselves into a lot of trouble. So if we look at pathways of, and I say other exposures because we don't know everything, but let's assume they're the ones that we know. You have, as you see on the far left, the source of contamination. And it'll travel through various environmental media. I'm just gonna move my camera a little bit. The air, the soil, the dust, water, food, breast milk being the highest on the food chain, and the most concentrated when it comes to toxic chemicals, consumer products, and then just the mother's environment and impact on the fetus in utero. And then those contaminants going through those environmental media end up going into our systems through various routes of exposure. So inhalation, so breathing stuff in, dermal contact going through the skin, ingestion through food, water, through the mother, through the placenta, into the unborn, and that's basically the major ways for us to be exposing ourselves. And here's a diagram I use often with patients. It's a diagram of total load. And inside it's like we're barrels. We just keep on filling and filling. And if we detoxify and if we live our lives properly as best as we can, we won't fill up to the top and we won't become symptomatic. So every day we have to make efforts to reduce the amount of stuff coming into our systems. And it's not just stuff, to be honest. It's, if you look over there at the arrows, it's also stress. So it could be, things that cause us depression or anxiety. Could be abuse. It could be trauma. It could be an accident of some sort. It could be just everyday work stress or home stress. And then, of course, it could be things like the regular that we all understand, and that's like pesticides and toxic metals and pollutants in the air and the water. Mold is a big one. Exposures at work, medications, drugs, illicit drugs, alcohol, home chemicals and cleaners, radiation of ionizing and non-ionizing sort, regular everyday stimulants and depressants, alcohol, smoking, viruses and infections, things that we absorb through our gut if we have inflammation, our regular allergy sensitivities to things. So the way we react to our environment might be different from what other people, the way other people react. And then plain old genetics, just, you're given a certain set of cards and you gotta live with it somehow. So if we can help the body deal with those stressors, if we look at them as stressors, if we can help the body reduce the load coming in, then we will, I think, be able to stay away from a lot of those areas that can cause us ill health. So that allostatic load, that total cumulative physiological and biological burden that the body has to deal with, and that comes to us through life's demands, have to be acknowledged. Demands that can be physical, chemical, or even emotional. And what we try to do is we try to adapt. That's our nature. Humans are very adaptable. Animals try to adapt. Every organism on this planet for survival tries to adapt. And adaptation is a continuous process requiring change. It's throughout one's lifespan, you're constantly adjusting to adapt. And the goal is basically to achieve a balance of energy and ability to meet those demands so that you can just keep going homeostatically. Unfortunately, if there are just too many demands made on you, and your adaptation processes, they always require more energy from you. What happens with time is a person becomes exhausted, and eventually the illness comes around. So if we look at an energy balance, and I always do this with my patients, I'm always looking at, are they eating well? Are they exercising? Are they treating their bodies well? How many demands are they making of themselves? Are they having others make too many demands? What sort of a stressful environment do they live in? And what are they doing to help with detoxification and metabolism, excretion, and help maintain their immune system? And what sort of genetics have they been given? This all has an impact on the physiological systems of the body, how well the heart works, and how well they build muscle, and how well their nervous system works and their hormones work. So it's a big balance of many things. And the gene-environment interactions are now more important than ever. Each person has a unique risk of developing certain diseases because of their genetic makeup. But that can be altered with proper sort of nutritional status, trying to avoid certain exposures at certain times of development, especially in utero, and reducing the allostatic load. So if you wonder to yourself, well, where can I start? This is all very scary and daunting, and boy, oh boy, we're all trying to swim through this big soup that's been created by the Industrial Revolution and just capitalism and lack of foresight and respect for our environment or our life on this planet. Well, where do you start? Well, this is a nice little mnemonic. It's CH2OPD2. And it sounds like a Star Wars plug, but what that stands for is community, home, hobby, occupation or school, personal, diet, and drugs. So you're looking at your community, where in the community, could it be, industry, landfills, hydro wires, farmlands, pesticide spraying, golf courses. How does that work around you? Where are sources of exposure? Industry. In the home, what do you find in the home that could possibly impact? Cleaning agents, air fresheners, scented candles, that kind of thing. Hobbies, people who are artists can use a lot of different types of chemicals, etc. Looking at one's occupation, one's exposures at school. Looking at personal care products, hairsprays and lotions and perfumes and cosmetics and colognes, and the number of amalgams in your mouth, and prosthetic devices, etc. Then the diet, Is it mostly packaged food? Is it fresh food? Is it organic, not organic? You know, there's lots of pros and cons here and there. And then medications, drugs, and even recreational drug use is something that needs to be addressed. So we're watching for an increased exposure, singly or in combination. It's always in combination. As you notice with that total load diagram, it's coming in from all angles and from all sort of different sets, subsets. You're looking at biologicals, so you're looking at, you know, we see people with Lyme and Lyme co-infections. We see people with all types of viruses. That can throw the system off completely while your immune system is trying to battle what's on board. Fibers and construction materials, and there's toxic metals like mercury, cadmium, arsenic, lead, nickel, chromium. All those metals are kind of traveling through our various food and water ways, etc. And we have to be kind of cognizant as to, you know, where does that really come from, and what sort of processes did that particular product go through before it ended up on my plate, you know. Inorganic compounds, organic compounds, radiation, ionizing and non-ionizing. And Dr. Miller will talk more about that in the next talk. And physical agents. So that includes noise, vibration. There's been issues with wind turbines, that sort of thing. For example, indoor air quality, you know, 80 to 90% of our time is spent indoors. A lot of kids studying, but indoor air is 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air. And fragrances can be quite a problem for people who've developed sensitivities, or because the chemicals that we smell, whether they be fragrances or cleaning agents or what have you, they go right into the brain very quickly through our olfactory bulbs, which are at the back of our nose. And they can mess things up with concentration and headaches and mood, etc. And so air quality is important right off the bat for that reason, but also for our lungs, our respiratory airways. Oops, sorry, I'm going backwards. So for those who use personal care products and cosmetics, the Canadian cosmetic regulation is not so sexy. Basically, what they're saying is that the David Suzuki Foundation said, whoa, this is not good. People, especially young folk, are using a lot of stuff that's not good for them. And the Dirty Dozen was created for cosmetics, and the David Suzuki Foundation wrote a document called "What's Inside That Counts," and it's a really great document, and I encourage you to share that with those who you care about, so that you can reduce their exposures as they get older, because they will have issues most likely in time, and it's better to catch it now than later. And so, as you know, and I'm just looking at my slide here, sort of peeking over my camera, most of the ingredients lists in Canada are not complete. They are not, people, industry by law is not bound to have to reveal everything that they put in products, whereas in the USA they are. So that is a bit of a problem, because you really don't know what you're getting most of the time. Here's the list of the Dirty Dozen, just to let you see how, you know, you'll find things like formaldehyde, a lot of formaldehyde in our products, and there are a lot of people who are allergic to that. It's also found in cigarette smoke. And remembering that fragrances don't smell beautiful to everyone. A lot of people who have asthma or sensitivities or suffer from migraines or even have other issues, they can find fragrances and other scented products quite debilitating. So I've mentioned these already, the biologicals, the physicals, the organic chemicals, and the inorganic chemicals. And in the inorganic chemicals, or sorry, yeah, the organic chemicals, we're looking at, volatile organic compounds and persistent organic pollutants. So basically, all the things that I mentioned with indoor air, you get VOC, they're called VOCs. And then you can get persistent organic pollutants that can act as endocrine disruptors and things that are basically throwing your hormones off. Okay. And so we take histories and we get a history of overload. We look at technology as well, people who have had to go to the hospital a lot and have lots of MRIs or CT scans. I think you've seen all this, but even, psychosocial histories, we see if there's been histories of abuse or enormous stressors. And autoimmune diseases are a big one as well. So we sort of delve into every realm. So what happens to toxins? They go into the system. They get absorbed through their skin, lungs, alimentary tract. They're distributed around the body. They go into storage sites like the plasma proteins, fat, liver, bone, and brain. And then they get transformed to some degree in the liver and the GI tract, the kidneys, the lungs, the blood, the lymphatic system. And then they get excreted through the feces, the urine, the exhalation, breast milk, perspiration. That's a complicated diagram of the liver, but basically things go through phase 1 and phase 2 pathways, and your liver has to work very hard to get rid of junk. And if you don't eat well, and if you don't have good, very nutritious foods, your body can't deal with those toxins properly. And what will happen is that you get inflammation in the body, and that can cause illness and cancers. It's really important that food be your first and foremost, that concern. You're eating really well and cleanly. And there's a picture of a cell. If we don't treat ourselves right, or if things are a little bit wonky in our lives, even though we try hard, sometimes things don't work out the way we want to. Our cells don't like it. And the mitochondria, little powerhouses, can get a little poisoned, and those are the mitochondria there. So it's important to keep our little powerhouses going so we don't become fatigued. I throw this in. Dr. Miller is going to talk more about that, but when the barrel fills up and people start becoming symptomatic, it's like the barrel is overflowing. Some people get electromagnetic hypersensitivity, and these days, because of cell phones and cell phone towers, we're seeing a lot more of that. And he'll talk to you more about electromagnetic radiation and how people can feel quite unwell. So we see people coming in like this, and we basically put our detective hats on and try to figure out why a person may be feeling unwell. And we've been seeing a lot of this lately. So just because it's not a chemical doesn't mean it can't affect you. And radiation can affect you, even the non-ionizing type, the really sort of benign, radio microwave stuff that we think is perfectly safe, or we've been told is perfectly safe, but really is not. So what do? We want to weed, seed, and feed. We want to remove those things that fill our barrel. We want to seed. We want to plant some good seeds of health. And then we want to nourish it. We want to feed it so that our garden grows and develops something beautiful and healthy, and we become vibrant and strong. So exposure reduction principles to decrease body burden are basically very simple. This is a sort of mass balance. We were talking about an energy balance before, and now I'm looking at a mass balance. So we're decreasing the input and increasing the output. So increasing the metabolic conversion rates. So we're trying to get those mitochondria and everything working, really efficiently so we can get rid of toxins, enhancing antioxidant reserves. How? Fruits and vegetables, lots of hydration, exercise. So you're mobilizing everything, and then healthy excretion of the toxins to optimize bowel and kidney function. Seems pretty straightforward. We want to avoid polluting ourselves with smoking and alcohol and junk food and all those things, fast foods, all those things that just cause our systems to really get glutted. We want to get away from all that. We want to say no to that and make the right choices. So decreasing input, we've talked about increasing output. We've talked about introducing mobilization, so by having enough fluid and heat. So sauna therapy can be very helpful. And then the increasing metabolic reserves, one can think about supplements that can help. It's, a lot of the times I find that people who are under stress and with all those stressors, whether they be even genetics, that the genes are just not doing what they need to do, that sometimes people need some vitamins. And so we do lab work and we find out what might be missing. And just taking a good exposure history, we discover what is best for them. It takes a while. We spend a couple of hours with our patients. We get them to fill out a long questionnaire. Basically just do a lot of detective work. And what's kind of odd, I find, is that we see patients that have seen a lot of specialists and nobody knows what to do with our patients. And they come to us, they've been around the block 5 times. They've had lots of tests done and nothing's really come up. And so it's nice to be able to do this work because we take everything into account and we put it all together for them. So natural methods of detoxification are really important. We talked about nutrition, supplements to some degree, sauna therapy or sweating. If you don't have a sauna, you can have some like warm baths or hot baths with supervision, depending on how you're feeling. Exercising, always starting slow and carefully and then just building up so you can get a little bit of a sweat going or a lot of a sweat if you're really athletic. Having enough soluble and insoluble fibers and natural choleretics to help you get rid of stuff, and doing your meditation, your mindfulness, so that a lot of deep breathing exercises, relaxation, balancing your hormones, oxygenating all the cells in your body is really important. And I have fasting there in brackets because, if a person is malnourished or they're just not getting the right balance of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, etc., fasting can sometimes help a little bit sort of to reset things, but it can be problematic if a person has a lot of junk to get rid of, because you do, like in that liver diagram I showed you, you do need to have the adequate amount of proper vitamins to get rid of the stuff. Otherwise, you can actually hurt yourself more, since things are turned from, a particular toxin most of the time goes into a much more potent and nasty form when it's being converted. So your body needs to be able to suck that up and sponge it up quickly and get rid of it quickly so it doesn't do any more damage. Not so simple. And then with the physical agents like wireless, Dr. Miller will talk about that. Make sure you don't have that around the house either. Appliances and wireless devices and cell phones, don't sleep with those at night, and cordless phones and that kind of stuff. So if we look at seeds of health, we've got sleep, sweating, environment, air, food, water, soil. We've got exercise and pacing. So when pacing means basically not overdoing your, not pushing yourself so hard that you crash. So knowing what your body can do to such an extent that when you do exercise or do, whatever it is, physical activity, you don't overdo it. Because when you overdo things, that's when you can start going into some sort of cycles that we end up having to scrape people off the floor. Because we have some wonderful people who are very type A plus plus plus, and they just go go go. They have tons of energy, and they go 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 for years. They go, and then they hit a wall, right? The allostatic load, the adaptation thing I was talking to you about earlier. So I think our whole life has to be paced. It's easy when we're feeling well to just overdo it, and sometimes we can never stop until we crash. So pacing is important, taking time to do your mindfulness and breathing and relaxation and gratitude. D is for diet, drugs, detoxification. S is for supports, which include things that help support yourself, journaling, positive affirmations, spiritual supports through congregations or groups, or just personal time with nature or the arts or whatever. Medical supports, family supports, social supports, occupational, financial supports. That's all very important. And if we look at this picture, the body systems, that's basically the seeds of health. If we're just sitting around too much, or we're under a lot of stress from psychological demands, we're not eating well, and we're living in an environment that's polluted in the air and water and pesticides, et cetera, and we're not sleeping well. Sleep is really important. Then we're just going to hit exhaustion. What we want to do is we want to just fix that and make sure that the seeds of health are nicely balanced and working well for us. So I don't think I need to tell you, we've come a long way over the last 25 years, talking about natural. They never had natural cleaners when I was, practicing 25 years ago. The rage came in maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And, chemical-free places, homework, school environments, natural personal care products, doing things without pesticides, fungicides, or herbicides, being really wary of any mold in the house. Mold is a really big problem, and this should not be tolerated. If you can handle musty smells in your basement, I urge you to not allow that to continue, to do something about it, because if it hasn't done something to you yet, it will. And then looking about making sure that your indoor air is clean. If it's not, or if the environment isn't great, you might want to think of getting an air purifier, making sure there's a filter on your furnace, making sure you have, proper HEPA filter on your vacuum cleaner, or it's a central vac or what have you, but you're not kicking up stuff and rebreathing it. There are lots of volatile organic compounds in construction materials. And so you need to be aware of those and be cognizant of just making sure you're opening windows and that you're taking things, you're making good choices about what you put in your home. Okay. Also, a stress-free environment is obviously important to help your whole system work better. And minimizing screen time and wireless exposures are really important. We talked about the diet. There's something we use, we call it the fatigue fighter plan diet. It was created by our dietitians, about 15 years ago. And it helps people think about every meal has to have 6 components in it. complex carb, protein, vegetable, fruit, calcium source, and a good source of fat, oil. So if people were to think about that and not just grab and go, they might find they might even have a lot more energy than they realized. And also being wary of food allergies and intolerances is important. We see people with histamine allergies, or not histamine allergies, histamine intolerances and other types of issues around food that they never knew they had. And that's been making them feel sick for a very long time. We've talked about supports, and I think that is very clear, just basically being able to discuss matters with all layers of your social circle, and not being afraid to sort of speak out and say no to certain things that you think, if you think that might be a threat to your health, just say no. I prefer you don't wear that cologne, please, or that perfume, or use that particular cleaning product at work, please. And my advice to adolescents, because they are the ones that really need, I think, the most guidance. And we're sort of always hesitant to sort of say things to them because we don't want to overstep our boundaries, or we don't want to press any sensitive buttons. But basically, I tell them, purchase products that contain the least number of contaminants and toxic ingredients. And so you can always let them know about the David Suzuki document. Avoid scented products, look for fragrance-free products. Beware of labels that say unscented, natural, green, or organic, because that's not guaranteed. Okay, and then there's a really good guide, Less Toxic Guide, and the Skin Deep database. I talked about that already. And we talked about, I think the trend now, the skin lightening compounds and the tanning beds and the sprays and the mists, things are getting a little bit more natural in that domain. I'm happy to say it's no longer so alarming. So go simple, go cheap, go natural. Do you want cosmetics or do you want healthy skin? Do you want fragrances, or is it better just to have good hygiene and natural body odor? It's not the end of the world. That says sprays. Do you want to use a spray that you end up inhaling and other people inhale, or do you want to use a stick or a gel that doesn't aerosolize into the air? People can use these pretty laden lotions, or they can use natural products. They can use air fresheners, or they can have fresh air. They can open a window. And the last one, yes, the wrinkle-free clothing versus ironing. So they're putting formaldehyde and other chemicals in those clothes that are wrinkle-free. So, nothing comes without a price, right? So on that note, I want to thank you for your time tonight.
To do is continue to thrive and adapt to all these new challenges that surely are coming our way.